Hi, everybody. This is Bert Grantges with Vera, and today we're going to talk about the state of the enterprise encryption and how to improve it. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes to allow everybody to join. So give us about 2 minutes and we'll get started. Okay, I think everybody's joined, so let's go ahead and get started today. So again, hi everybody, my name is Bert Grantges. I am the Vice President of Solution Engineering here at Vera. And today we're going to be talking about a report that recently came out related to the state of enterprise encryption and how it's being leveraged and how to improve upon it. But before we get started, I'll cover off a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be about 35 minutes, depending on how the timeline goes. And we will include and talk about some of the use cases that Vera is working with our customers and how we can improve upon encryption and leverage data security in the enterprise today. We'll also be addressing a few questions as they come up. So at any point in time, feel free to type your questions into the chat box, and we will do our best to address those during the webinar. But if we do miss your particular question, we will be putting out a blog in a few days to kind of capture the questions that were asked and make sure that we get those answered, and we'll certainly let you know about that. Okay, well, let's get started then. From a topic standpoint, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the research methodology that was leveraged to produce the report, some of the top findings that we found in terms of how the enterprises that we work with are leveraging encryption today, and what's driving the needs for file-level encryption. We're also going to talk about what always-on file security means, and particularly with Vera, and discuss some customer use cases and address the Q&A. So on the research methodology, let's talk about this. So Vera commissioned UBM, latter part of 2018, to conduct an online survey, and our intention really was to explore how encryption and access controls are being leveraged. And the goal was to understand how an organization, currently use these technologies to, identify, their top priorities that drive file-level security in kind of a zero-trust model within the enterprise. Now, the data set that we're going to be talking about, this survey included over, 130 cybersecurity and IT decision makers throughout North America. Nearly half of the respondents were director level and above, so your CIO, your CISOs, vice presidents of security, et cetera. And we covered a variety of different industries, so financial, IT services, government agencies, as well as healthcare and manufacturing. All the respondents worked at companies that were either from 100 employees to tens of thousands, but the majority of these companies were 1,000 employees and above. So this will give you kind of a sense of how this data was aggregated and how we produced the results that we're going to be talking about today. So specifically, as we dive into the data and what we were trying to pull out of this study is to understand the organizations, enterprises, big and small, and how they currently approach encryption and access controls to specifically try to avoid breaches of data. So breach of data, somebody coming in could be a malicious outsider, malicious actor, could be an internal employee that's doing so unwittingly, or simple mistakes during the course of the standard business process. And we wanted to uncover why sensitive and personal data is often left accessible and unencrypted. So what are the blockers to leveraging file-level encryption within the enterprise? And then how could a always-on file security model operate within an enterprise to put the security teams back in control of data for your particular organization, especially when it's shared with other people? So these are going to be kind of the focal points that we are going to look at. So the big question, how are you as organizations currently protecting their data? And what we found is there are a variety of these standard players that you would see, rising to the top, right? When we look at the security technologies the organizations are using to protect what they deem as sensitive, when we look at assets or file level security, your standard models come up to the top. Antivirus absolutely is going to be a key contributor to making sure that you have healthy assets within your business. But access control and encryption are also at the top. So you would think that with that heavy usage of access and encryption, that data breaches would be far less frequent than what we're seeing today. Getting into security awareness training, data loss prevention, mobile device management, and then digital rights management and others are coming in at the bottom. And what we see is even though encryption is leveraged high at the top, getting down to file level encryption and more specifically, a type of encryption that allows users to, or organizations to be more granular around their controls certainly is not at the top of the list, and that's what's effectively protecting that real-time data. When we look at the types of encryption, what we see is they start to fail in a lot of different areas. So encrypted network traffic, endpoint disk encryption, these are all well and good when you're working within your own environment. But as we look at cloud storage encryption, which is that extended perimeter, and encrypted email attachments, that's when we start to see how people are leveraging encryption as they start to share data with other people. But the real factor here that I think is really important in how we understand where encryption is applied and how it's leveraged is none of these technologies really provide real-time control of your data when it leaves that perimeter. So when it's out of your physical control, you don't have the type of real-time control for that always-on security that allows you to understand where people are using your data and how you can take back control of data if your relationship changes with a third party. So this was really interesting to us. I mean, if we look at the fact that everybody's using encryption, we see that very high on the list, and where they're implementing it all resides within the network perimeter. So the goal and the standard reactionary model of security today is to continue to build those higher walls and not let people in to protect your own data. So this begs a really big question. So why isn't file level encryption, data level encryption being leveraged more in the enterprise? And mainly what we found out through this study is that the current solutions really don't map to how organizations should protect the content. The vast majority of encryption solutions out there aren't designed to be user-friendly, right? The end users who are leveraging these additional technologies, the Dropboxes of the world that want to adopt these cloud storage models for collaboration, they are, seeing these types of encryption solutions extremely cumbersome. They are not allowing them to operate in a productive manner, and it creates a lot of friction when they go to share this content externally. And the existing environment and the applications, continue to be a problem. A user has an idea of how they want to work with a particular file. There's applications, there's Word and PowerPoint and Excel, and they don't want to have proprietary viewers tell them how they can work with a particular piece of content. They want to leverage these native applications. So all of these, factors come into a real model for why security professionals today aren't able to, enforce this type of file-level encryption because of that consistent pushback between security and the business, productivity, and, protecting what's most important. As we dive a little deeper into the metrics, when we ask, how important is real-time access control to these enterprises, we see that it's extremely important. Nearly 70% of the respondents were very concerned about the lack of control they have on their data when they share it with third parties, right? And, this is how business is being done today. You have a world where you're constantly forced to work with outside organizations, whether it be legal entities, manufacturing partners, design partners. That data needs to travel, and that lack of control is a big concern for the enterprise today. And with that concern, the flip side is that very few of the respondents had any kind of means to gain real-time knowledge on where their data is and how they can control it, either through revocation or granular access controls to the data itself. So we see this disparate view of how enterprises feel the real-time access control is extremely important, but very few of them have a means to actually handle this problem. So there's a big gap in terms of the needs of an organization and what's out there today to support it. And then finally, everybody is clamoring for file level security. Nearly 70% of the respondents believe that a file-based encryption method, file security, or security at the file level, that allows you to control but also track and audit the integrity of that data and manage it in a real-time way would be extremely useful to their business. And this is not uncommon from what we see in the marketplace today. So all of these things considered, the security industry as a whole is still very reactionary. The legacy perimeter model that's been around for decades at this point is about how do I protect the data that's inside my castle, right, inside my organization? How do I build bigger walls around my network? How can I containerize my applications so that the data stays inside? Or even management of identities and brokering that internally within my organization. These legacy models were fine 20 years ago when organizations primarily did business internally. However, in the past 10 to 15 years, we've seen an explosion of collaboration within the enterprise, both internally and externally. With the cloud collaboration services, email makes it extremely easy for you to send out the data from your organization, at the click of a button, right? And then the concept of BYOD and the fact that everybody has a smartphone that can give them access to the internet and these cloud collaboration services, and they're bringing them to work, they're using them for email. From a security point of view, organizations are consistently losing control of how their internal employees are managing their data with shadow IT, et cetera, and how that explodes out even greater when you talk about the need to share and proliferate that data outside of your business in order to do your daily operations and be productive. So, a result of this survey brought up 3 key areas of what's driving the need for that file level encryption. So, not surprisingly, one of the biggest is the secure cloud collaboration and services that we have today. That's Box, Dropbox, SharePoint Online, OneDrive. Working with the types of tools that allow your employees to easily share data amongst themselves as well as external third parties. And this really boils down to productivity. Control is they're willing to give up a little bit of control in order to allow the employees to be productive, or in severe cases, reduce that productivity gain in order to ensure that the sensitive information isn't leaking. And this causes a lot of friction between security and business. The obvious protection of sensitive data that's used by employees is critical. I mean, you think about, CAD design files and the absolute nature of your critical intellectual property that you're developing as an organization, or sensitive data that your customers may be providing to you either for health records or for financial transactions, and making sure that that's protected internally. These are all reasons why file level encryption is really getting the spotlight. And then, of course, compliance and risk, right? When we think about the impacts of GDPR, now that it's in action, and we're just starting to see, what that's going to do for Europe, these same types of compliance and regulatory processes coming into the United States. We see NYDFS implementing their cybersecurity rules. We have the Privacy Acts in California. This is all going to continue to, expand further as the need for trust within a organization, both from the consumer to the businesses, become more important, but also around how do we ensure that we can manage and that our companies are really doing what they need to ensure the data that they're taking from the end users are being protected. So how we view the world from a Vera perspective is that security should follow your data, and you shouldn't try to lock your data into a box and not let anybody approach it. If the data is secure, this gives you a high degree of confidence and control that you have the ability to share and be productive in a means that is natural to the end user. So what does that mean? It means that we need to be able to not just secure certain file types, but we should be able to secure any kind of data that's in, unstructured within your organization. Databases and structured data for long periods of time have had means of protection through multiple different access checks, database level encryption, and other technologies. But as soon as that data is consumed by an application, generated into a report, these unstructured files that are floating around in your environment, that data needs to be protected. You also need a way to allow your employees to be productive, and that's allowing them to share information how they want to without concern for security. So adopting cloud collaboration strategies, going into the instant messenger and the collaborative, Microsoft Teams and Slack channels, or even, just standard email, allowing them to produce content and share that information in order to do their business effectively and securely. While file level security is really important, the additional aspect of auditing and tracking that information is extremely important to the success of any kind of security practice within your environment. Having direct feedback on not only who's accessing data, but what are they trying to do with data? Where are they looking at this data? Is somebody trying to copy and paste and breach sensitive information, and you see that information being blocked. Understanding the integrity of the data. Has somebody made changes to this or attempted to make a change to a file without having proper authentication to do so? So that feedback loop associated with your file level protection is extremely important for investigations, auditing and tracking, being able to defend, potential breaches that you may have, and having that as part of a solution is what we deem, extremely important. And then finally, certainly not, the least important is the ability to just have a simple means of revoking content, especially once it's been shared externally of the business. So whether that's through managing access through Active Directory, your single sign-on solutions, or just hitting a button to say, I no longer want this particular user or group of users to have access to this content. Having a means of removing that access is the holy grail of sharing data outside of your business. So how does Vera go about protecting this information? So with Vera and how we look at file level security today, it starts with the data itself. So first and foremost, we're going to protect that unstructured data, that file data, with AES 256-bit encryption. And this is going to happen locally to the file. The file never gets stored anywhere other than where you would naturally want to store that information. So we've protected this file with encryption technology that's tried and true. Next, we're going to provide dynamic access control. Dynamic access control, meaning that you can change that access control at will. We do this by separating out the access control from the actual document. This allows for a real-time control over your document, no matter how many copies of this particular document have been made or whether it's been sent externally to the business. And finally, we're going to look at active file security. So active file security is beyond just access control. This is being able to dictate to singular users, groups of users, or an entire company what they can do with the data while it's actually in use. So is this blocking copy-paste, allowing some to print but others not, dynamic watermarking of the data? All of this granular level control is important to have while you're actively using the content. And a really important part of this is that you want all of that protection to still end up with a natural user experience for a particular user. You don't want them to have proprietary users. When you open a PDF file, you want that to open in Adobe Acrobat, the natural application. These are what your users understand. This is what they use. But you want that particular type of application to still operate in a protected fashion. So you have to be able to allow those security controls to be applied even while they're used in a native application, whether that's Adobe Acrobat, AutoCAD, Creo, Adobe Illustrator, Microsoft Office products, etc. You want to have that granular level control and that auditing and feedback loop as a result of those interactions, but still let your users leverage the apps and tools that they've been leveraging for a long, long time. All this combined is what we call always-on file security. This allows your users to collaborate without being hindered. They can leverage the cloud collaboration tools. They can send emails. They can share data how it is most productive for them, and they can do so securely. You need to be able to track and set policies that allow that granular level of access, and then also allow people to revoke access at any point in time with a click of a button, or have it even in an automated fashion tied into your existing authentication mechanisms. But that capability to revoke access after it's left your physical control, after it's left your perimeter, is what makes this such a powerful way to protect the data that's so important to you. So real quick, how do we see our customers utilizing this technology? What are some of the use cases? So obviously, protecting financial and HR data is extremely important. We have large financial institutions protecting the most sensitive spreadsheets that they have that really dictate their 5-year strategies over time that are being worked on by the top tier executives. We have organizations that are protecting all of their recruiting data and personnel data within SharePoint, automatically protecting that information as it's being uploaded, but allowing them to collaborate very easily through this file level encryption that works within the Microsoft Office products. All of these are key use cases that we see that our customers are taking advantage today. Additionally, as we get into the manufacturing space, we find that controlling access to the most sensitive IP, billions of dollars of IP being protected at a file level, even if they share this data with manufacturers in other countries that are suspect for copyright infringement and things of that nature, they have a great deal of control over how those organizations can utilize that information. And in the event that those relationships change, they can literally revoke access and make those files inert on the end user's device. So even if they change manufacturers at any given point in time, they have the ability to take those sensitive design files and take back control over that data. So I'll leave you all with a question, something to take back and internalize is, as you're reflecting on your current security practices, are you being reactionary versus proactive? How are you protecting the data that's leaving your organization? How are you ensuring that as a security professional in an enterprise environment, that you're properly taking control over what's most important to you, the information that's being generated by your employees and your business? Now, from a question standpoint, I see that we have a few questions that have come up, and I'll go ahead and answer some of these right now. So how does file level security differ from traditional DRM tools or like a Microsoft product? And that's a good question. So from a Vera perspective, how do we differ from standard DRM? The main aspect is being able to support just about any type of file from a dynamic access control perspective, and then getting into that granular level of control for a wide variety of file types, as well as across multiple different platforms. So if you think about like a Microsoft aspect, they're very tied to their ecosystem. Being an agnostic provider, we see this as a true advantage that, a file that is protected is going to work the same way on Mac as it does Windows. You're going to be able to leverage that within the existing application. You don't need a proprietary viewer to get in and access that content. And in our case, you can actually leverage our protections for a variety of file types without even having our software installed. So no matter where in the world you may be sharing that data or working with whichever companies, in some cases, having the ability to view and edit that content without any software having to be installed is a huge advantage. And that's where we see a big difference from Vera versus traditional DRM products. Okay, so let's look at another one. So how does this differ from DLP, or data loss prevention? Well, DLP is really more of a reactionary model about keeping data inside of the perimeter. Our model is really built on an aspect that your data is going to leave your perimeter, whether you like it or not. How can you maintain control? So a typical DLP will inspect at the endpoint, at the network layer, your email layer, and it will do content inspection and try to block content as it's leaving your organization. In our case, that content is protected already. It has strict access control associated with it that can be changed dynamically. And as it's leaving your organization or being collaborated on internally, really doesn't matter. That level of control still exists for the enterprise. Okay, so does Vera have built-in identity or authentication? We do. So I think if I understand the question, Vera can confirm your identity. That's a key aspect of the access control. And the access control as it is can be tied to multiple different types of systems. So while we do have a built-in user management system, that's really more tiered towards leveraging or more geared towards leveraging a enterprise solution that you may already have in place. So if you're utilizing a SSO solution like a Ping Federate or an Okta or others, or you want to tie directly to your Active Directory, we make it very, very flexible for you to allow your users to authenticate in a means that's natural to your business. So again, we're not trying to recreate the wheel. We want to tap into those existing systems that you already have so that your users can, easily operate in a manner that makes sense. So this actually goes and extends into a third-party scenario. So if you are leveraging a true partner, you're working with an acme.com to accomplish XYZ, and they have an SSO, you can even bring that SSO model into this application, so you don't have to worry about managing another entity's users. So Vera makes it very, very flexible to work with real-time authentication for having access to that data. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question here. Let me see what is in the queue. So what is the difference between access control and full security? So I think that's a good question, right? So when we talk about, Vera's always-on file security and the active file protection that we apply to the file, it's well beyond just access control. So if you look at typical encryption, it goes to a certain point. Access control only encryption dictates that, hey, I'm going to provide a encrypted file to a user or group of users, and based on some authentication model, typically a password or a passphrase, the end user will be able to unencrypt that data. And once that data is unencrypted, they can do whatever they want with it. They can print it, they can copy paste it, they can send it to a third-party nation state. They have a trusted relationship with that content. In a always-on file security model like we provide with Vera, the big difference is just because you have access to content doesn't mean that you should be allowed to share that content with other people. Doesn't mean that you should be able to edit or manipulate that content. So having that granular level control, that third tier of control, is extremely important, and also being able to change that relationship as necessary. You send a view-only file to a particular user, and it turns out they do need to make an edit. You can make a change to do that for a period of time so that they can manipulate the contents of that file, but after, say, 15, 20 minutes, that capability goes away and they're back to only being able to view the content. So having that level of granular control is a big difference between pure access control and an always-on file security model. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for us today. I really appreciate your time. If I didn't get to your questions, again, we will be providing a blog or feedback on your questions in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out on your email for that. And as a thank you for taking time with us today on the webinar, we will be sending each of you the report in digital format, the state of enterprise encryption, and how you can improve upon it. So thanks a lot for your time, and hope you have a great day.